I'm Sam Tallman. I'm Director of Energy Services for Green Power Technologies, Puerto Rico. We are a small hydroelectric company. I'm joined with by my conversation partner, Tom King.
Tom King, founding director of the Fundación Borincana, nonprofit here on the island focused on energy transition issues for Puerto Rico.
And I want to build on, before I introduce our guest, build on the last thing that Ignacio said, which is many of the folks that are in positions to potentially make authoritative decisions about what's going to happen in Puerto Rico, particularly in the energy space, are frankly poorly informed in many cases. The broad community of energy companies, which is going to be our focus for the conversation this morning, works very diligently to try to spread the good word about the reasons we're optimistic, but also the challenges and the implications of some of the policy positions that are put forward with regarding energy. It's why Tom and I created the Puerto Rico Energy Forum, because these conversations weren't happening in a more public space. And that's exactly what a forum is a interchange of ideas where we can hear things we may disagree with and be able to engage with them and make sure that why is that the best option? Why is that maybe not the best option? What are the implications? Who are the players that need to be involved? Or all the above. So without any further ado, we're joined for our general forum meeting today by Gabriel Pérez and Jemaris Martes. They really need no introduction, but they're community leaders in energy in Puerto Rico. And this is a fortuitous moment to have you on, both of you. Thank you. Because we are in the midst, you guys can't see it, but behind the camera, there's a bunch of empty seats that will be filled later today because we're having the Puerto Rico Energy Forum's live National Clean Energy Week event here at Vivo Beach Club. If you're listening to this and don't have a ticket, it's not too late. You can still come. We'd love to have you here. We're gonna have reception after a series of panels and green drinks. And let me start there. Gabby, what is green drinks? Why you have 13 years doing it?
Oh, yeah, almost 14.
Almost 14.
Almost 14. First of all, good morning. Buenos dias. Thank you for having me here. So, yeah, Green Drinks is an event for the community, to share ideas. It's a networking event that was established 14 years ago that we meet every month and we just share ideas. It's a very inclusive event, very informal. Every month we try to bring different topics and just to have an open conversation, with community leaders, distributors, government, federal government, non-for-profits, installers. So
when I was working to attract companies to the island, it was one of the premier points that I made sure they knew about was if you're going to be on the island visiting with potential company suppliers, workforce, buildings, looking at Puerto Rico as a business operation. You have any questions about energy, make sure that your visit is scheduled around the second Wednesday of the month, because what Puerto Rico lacks in some formal organization sometimes makes up for hugely with regards to the sense of cooperative competition, engagement. I think that is, and we see it with blockchain, we see it with a whole bunch of other tech. We see it with a bunch of other sectors that I think are looking to grow. With energy, I think it is on the top of everybody's mind. And you might need to speak just a little bit louder.
Yeah, and I think the industry, we even have a chat of over 500 people. So I think we're a very united industry. We could have differences, but there's a lot of respect. And this type of forum, give us the opportunity to share ideas, to talk to someone in the government that probably is difficult to reach out or have a formal meeting. So everybody's welcome. Everybody's, comes here and you learn a lot. You get a job, you get an alliance, you get to support a community. There's so much opportunity just joining and participating in those events.
I can say that we benefited hugely from it, just being able to promote our event today, and connecting with people. It's nice having a relatively small island because you can connect with people that, oh, of course we know each other, and it ends up becoming so much more than a business community, which is a social group.
Gabriel has done an amazing. Gabriel is actually co-founder of the Fundación Borincana. and a member of the board of directors. So we rely on him for much. In his community, he's worked, he's repped a number of companies on the island, including Blue Planet, which, sadly, is going in a different direction, but building up Solar New and working with ETS and others. So he's humble, but he's instrumental in making a lot of things happen.
It's also a good time for that type of channel to exist, because Puerto Rico being in a disruptive moment, having, I don't know how many billions of federal dollars available for a variety of different programs. This was Francisco Ruyan talking last week when everybody was at RA Plus. The unfortunate ones stayed behind, listened to an incredible oratory experience.
I give you that opportunity, you're not going to.
Yeah, no, exactly. You couldn't make it to Anaheim, you come to Fogo de Chao and you hear an excellent presentation. There was the announcement of the $350 million for public housing energy projects, which having that sort of access to directly where the funds are coming from, I think goes a long way. You're working with a couple of community level projects as well. Emma, what are you working on?
Yes. Hi, hello. Gracias por la invitación.
And please jump in. I'm so sorry I didn't bring you in earlier.
No, it's good. I'll pitch in when I see you in the right moment. So my name is Jemaris Martes. I work as the business development specialist for microgrids and utility scale renewable projects like Glen International. And before I jump into what I'm doing in the communities and large projects, etc., I want to give a huge shout out to Gabi, because when I moved to Puerto Rico, kind of lost. I still used to work for a company in the US, GE Renewables. I was like, I want to start doing work here in Puerto Rico. And the first thing I did was I learned about green drains. I went there without knowing anybody. And then every time there's a green drains, I have a list of questions that I want to ask certain people. And in a year and a half, I've been learning just like so much. And I've been trying to be intentional about it. And just by going to the green drains, I've done, I've advanced on so many different fronts that has ultimately brought me to be here with you all, that have been a little bit more time here in Puerto Rico doing amazing work. So I just want to say thank you, because, this the green drains itself in the community has been instrumental in allowing me to learn. And then now participate on the different initiatives that, myself personally, and also Glen International, we are participating in. So at Glen, we are a distributor, a supplier, a partner, and we bring in solutions for the renewable energy space, electrical infrastructure and renewable energy space. But through bringing technology to different, specific problems, I've been able to engage with communities. I work with La Cooperativa Hidroeléctrica La Montaña on certain fronts, mostly voluntary. But also, I've been supporting the utility scale projects, and then the technology and the solutions being kind of the key driver of that. By participating on those projects, I quickly learned that it's not just about technology, it's about people, it's about the communities, it's about equity, it's about policy. And so very quickly I've been learning about these other different angles of energy. And so I'm excited to be here and looking forward to discussing some of those aspects here.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. You made a point that I think is really worth coming back to, which is at Green Drinks and some of the other social gatherings for energy-minded people. There's a huge amount of diversity of different technologies, different elements, 6 different people working on 6 different areas of insurance for energy projects. That's one of the things that it's a behind the scenes element to getting some of the major projects off the ground, community level stuff, government level stuff. What, when you look at that landscape of different players, people you've asked questions to over the years, where is perhaps, what would people be most surprised by to know that that's actually happening in Puerto Rico?
Question. I think in general, the one thing when I've participated on other spaces, not within Puerto Rico, but the Gabriel Sept conference and other spaces where there's other people from the US, from the world. The one thing that they get, excited about is the adoption of distributed solar in Puerto Rico, the fact that we are, 1 to 5 or kind of changes and varies month by month, but we are one of the key or highest adopters of distributed solar and batteries of most, and anywhere in the world. So I think that's a key aspect that gets people excited. Naturally, because we have a backbone of laws that have supported that shift. On the other hand, and kind of on the flip side, in the US, there's a lot of development on the markets. You have, a competitive landscape. And so on the regulation side, the fact that Puerto Rico still doesn't have regulation, for example, for community solar, is something that also surprises people, not necessarily in a bad way, but you're telling me that you have this high adoption of distributed solar, but you still don't have these, key policies that have supported some in many projects in the US. It's kind of something that people, take people by surprise.
And you're actually hitting on something that we'll probably spend 10 or 15 minutes on the microgrid panel talking about. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna, other people have heard me say this, is that, we're gonna start focusing and getting a group together, an issue working group, focused on microgrids, because, microgrids aren't really what everybody thinks they are. And in Puerto Rico, we're making things up in terms of the frontier of what is a microgrid. And there's just no regulation or contractual structure to support that, aside from industrial microgrids, which are doing
Right.
very well, except when you come to permitting and interconnection, where they're still being slowed down.
It's both,
Across the board.
both of those two trends, though, are outcomes of basically the same thing. Correct me if you see otherwise. We have a macro level system that is broken, to say the least. And it's driving a lot of people to say, I can do it for less money at a higher quality myself. Driving, and there's a lot of federal dollars to support that move, but everybody who wants solar, who can afford solar, who can access certain funds for solar on their rooftop has a path to do so. And at the same time, anybody who wants to do a little bit ever so complicated, more complicated system like a microgrid or community solar ends up having to contend with the reasons why that grid is broken in the first place, whether it's regulation, whether it's permitting, whether it's just the frailty of the system itself. Do you see, so given the fact that those two things are sort of indirectly related, right? We have a lot of distributed solar and not a lot of community solar, microgrids, and other intermediary type projects. As the grid gets better, do you think that balance will shift and we'll have a lot more microgrids, a lot more community solar, and sort of see a plateauing of the community, or of the distributed residential solar?
I think that will depend. I was actually discussing this with Ignacio earlier this week. I see that for microgrids and community solar and more sophisticated distributed resources aggregated together, we're working in synchrony. You need to pull two levers, right? There's the technology side of it where you need DERMS, you need to orchestrate these different assets and resources, and so that becomes kind of under the wing of the utility. So you need that technology to be established and functional, but also, again, you need regulation and a permitting path that allows for these projects to actually come to fruition. So I don't think that the big hiccup is the technology. I think the technology is there. RUMA, I think, will eventually, understand that it has to be a priority for them. But I'm hopeful that we fix is the regulatory and the permitting side. I see that as the biggest hurdle. So if, in a hypothetical way, if we're able to really fix those key issues on the permitting and the regulation, we're able to define clear regulation for community solar, microgrids, et cetera, and people see a clear path as to how that is done, it could completely change the outcome. Whether, if, on the other hand, if we're not able to fix that, time keeps passing by, then the landscape can look completely different, because it's essentially the showstopper right now, I would say.
Yeah, and community microgrids might community solar might look very different in Puerto Rico when, say, it looks in Minnesota, right? I mean, in Minnesota, it's a 5 to 10 megawatt single site, and they're effectively within a local grid, and they're selling it, and they're responsible for selling it. It can be on bill for the local utility, and it's a number of things. Somehow, I just don't see Puerto Rico adopting that model, particularly given the penetration that you've seen. Everybody really loves the idea of a community solar, but you tell them, well, if the line's down, you're still not getting power. And so it's going to come back to, I think I still want solar and a battery, but that leads you back into what people like the Montaña and others have done with Grand Foco and the Martes, where they're setting things up to become what I've termed virtual microgrids, where there's many points of interconnection that can be managed as a PPP. It can be virtually net metering across the system and operating it. So it's not necessarily maybe 5 megawatts, but it's not 5 megawatts in one location. It's 5 megawatts spread across an area.
I think we're sort of at the tip of the spear with that kind of thing, because this is not going to be a strictly Puerto Rico type conversation. People everywhere, and this was part of the reason we were talking to Elisa Wood last week, who the co-founder or the founder of Microgrid Knowledge, is that people who have a critical load want power produced at that load. And so the recognition that if it's a solar farm or a diesel generator, it still has to be transmitted and distributed to the end user until that system is so robust. And I think there's some doubt as to how actually robust you can make it anywhere, not just in Puerto Rico, but anywhere. There will be a strong movement towards people saying, I'm gonna, the old adage, if you want it done right, you do it yourself. There's plenty of opportunity for people to still do it themselves. Gabby, you have seen a lot of companies with different technologies and different services come into Puerto Rico's market, leave Puerto Rico's market, be successful here, fail here. What is the differentiator between the companies that are successful and the companies that aren't?
Oh, that's a good question.
Wait, we're taking notes.
Yeah, please. Any insight you can share.
I think one of the errors that companies from the US or any other company that come here think that Puerto Rico is the same market as in the US, but they want to see Puerto Rico as similar to the US. Yes, we're from the US and we have a lot of things that are similar, even we use the NEC, the National Electric Code and technology, but the culture is different. The way of things done here are different than in the States. So you need to understand really the culture, and I think that has been one of the areas that companies that understand that have been successful, and the ones that don't understand them probably they leave after a year. And also talking a little bit about what you spoke with Emma, right now we're almost getting to a gigawatt storage penetrating to the grid. Per capita, probably we're one of the countries in the world generating storage. So I think storage is gonna stay. And we spoke about this last time with National Plus. Storage is gonna be like a refrigerator. Everybody will have it, and you're gonna be using it. Well, now EVs are gonna be connected. We're gonna get more EVs, or I don't know if they're gonna bring that time of use or virtual power plants. So there's gonna be a lot of technology and services that you can use your battery, not just for resiliency. That was the first thing. But
and just quickly on that point, Elisa made a comment. I asked her about an article she'd written, I guess back in 2017, where she said that energy is going through a smartphone moment, where microgrids are proliferating, and everybody used to be, you had a very strict landline, and now everybody has a computer in their pocket. And I think we're coming up on 50 years that Bill Gates said a computer in every home, right? And so I think the battery technological revolution is one that I think is going to be perhaps more important than any generation technology. I think we have the know-how broadly how to generate power.
Hey, Sam, if I may, imagine once all the cars, because the Cybertrucks have announced the bi-directional capabilities of EVs, and to adding into that storage, which again, you're talking about 120 kilowatt hour battery. Imagine when you're able to bring all of these other vehicles into the spectrum and have the bi-directional capabilities. That is a game changer for everywhere in the world.
We're gonna have, thanks Iggy, we're gonna have a panel later today on the future of energy demand. I think that comes into it a little bit and I'm trying to understand how do EVs play into that. I'm still a skeptical holdout with regards to the role that EVs are gonna have broadly. I think people will not want, if they have, if electrons are finite and they have electrons in the battery of their car, there have to be the right incentives, and the line between right and perverse is very fine for how people decide to use their energy or share it. Particularly if it's life or death, right? And we know that it can be. So it's an interesting conversation. I have yet to see convincing reports about the future of EVs in any market, let alone the Puerto Rico market. I think the EV companies have yet to see convincing reports on the future of EVs in any market. So,
But you know what? I'm seeing EVs right now, similar to when I saw solar 20 years ago. We were starting and it was a learning process. And at the beginning was like, it didn't even make sense. It didn't make, the ROI didn't make sense. We were paying $10 per watt. It was more love for the environment or something positive. I'm seeing that, and eventually it's gonna shift, with technology, incentives, infrastructure. There's countries that are very advanced, and we're seeing cars driving by themselves. I saw them in San Francisco last week, everywhere.
Yeah.
People taking an Uber and there was no one driving. I'm like, wow. So
Yeah, the Waymos, right?
yeah, I saw that.
I feel like you go to San Francisco and you're like a decade or two ahead of the future, and then that will trickle down into the rest of the world in a couple of decades.
But it's gonna happen.
and like I said,
But you know what? The storage, the whole thing with Samsung, and I don't know if you saw those news about the Samsung new battery. I know Hema does because I
Yeah.
showed it to her, but 600-mile range with a solid state new battery they're releasing. 600-mile range with one charge, 600 miles, and a 9-minute charge time. It's a game changer. So I mean, this is gonna be, and the whole storage side, what we saw in RE Plus, half the size of the storage. So it's gone density to half, and also half the price. So the price is gone to half, and the size of the area that you need for the storage is half. So I mean, if this pattern continues, it's a game changer.
Well, I mean, they've still got a few manufacturing issues to sort out, but yeah, it's really promising. It's really promising.
we're going to have, moving forward, a regular sidebar conversation. Tom referenced earlier that we want to have microgrids as an ongoing conversation because it can produce anything from white papers to strategy documents to creating really a community that's focused on how do you progress on the microgrid front. We also want to do one on the circular economy. We've been speaking with the folks at the Puerto Rico Science Trust because they have a series of conversations around different technological and innovative challenges and barriers that have to be overcome. And one of them has been the end of life use for solar panels, and particularly what does the circular economy look like for that? Tying it into what we're talking about with Ignacio, battery innovation can ultimately move us away from having on-site generation because we can reproduce potentially the power that we need if it's brought from other sources. So
Or
we'll see.
more ways. As you replace all the batteries that have already been installed because they seem so much cheaper and so much.
Well, look, I think that's part of the conversation as well. There are trade-offs for all of this, and understanding what the balancing act is going to be the key piece for regulators and policymakers, given the fact that they may not be as informed as we'd like them to be. And there's a lot of technological stuff. Gabby made the point just a second ago. We may have no idea what these look like in 20 years if we're anticipating today's technological snapshot for today's problems. We are in many ways forgetting that tomorrow's problems are going to be addressed with tomorrow's technology, and that'll be even more true for 20 years down the road. I want to go back to a comment you made about culture, because that is it's an important one. And there's an Italian company that you and I both worked with before that saw Puerto Rico culturally as the easiest way to get into the United States. That they had other offices in the United States, but actually doing business in Puerto Rico was more like Italian culture than it was than doing business in California, for instance. And they very much saw it as a stepping stone to other markets. Is that something that, you were doing that with Blue Planet, you've been doing that with Soul Renew, Puerto Rico as a bridge to Latin America, to the Caribbean? I know that Glenn does projects all over the Caribbean as well. Where does Puerto Rico fit into the region? Where does Puerto Rico fit into the hemisphere?
Well, question, and a lot of things, usually the regulation or things start in California on the renewable energy side, and then are adopted to Puerto Rico, and then they are adopted to other countries in Latin America. So even the interconnection process, when we got approved, the interconnection process 2008, a lot of Latin countries didn't even have interconnection. So they were looking at Puerto Rico, what we were doing, how it was working, and they adopted it. Similar to storage. Storage here right now, Puerto Rico's laboratory for storage. Now with the grid that we have, we know which one will work in bad grid conditions and which one will not work, really. And if they work here, they're gonna work anywhere. So, and Mexico has a similar grid, so, we're seeing it in storage. Now you're gonna see it also with the virtual power plants, Puerto Rico, they're doing a pilot project. I'm already talking to college, they're already starting to receive payments from that pilot project. So, yeah, Puerto Rico, it's a pillar in Latam and a lot of countries in Latin America. Look Puerto Rico, they move forward to Puerto Rico. Also, Puerto Ricans need also to move outside Puerto Rico. It's not just Puerto Rico,
Not just to the continent of the United States.
Exactly, not just to, we have, we speak Spanish, we speak English, now with technology and internet, we do services to other countries or to other projects. I did that, projects in Mexico that was in Puerto Rico, and there's also incentives for exporting services. So we have to think out of the box. I think everybody's trying to do the same thing, and there's so much opportunity to not doing installation. There's so much opportunity in the industry, and not just renewable energy, solar. But probably I think that's a gap. Like, a lot of people are focusing on that.
Some of the people that we're training now for solar IT, right? I mean, we're training people about solar business, about design, and about engineering and energy demand. I mean, we're taking a different track to training people. Been very successful. We've hired several. Some of these people are now working for Luma. They're working for actually heading up other nonprofits working at solar. But there's also a number of people who have been doing some work and designs for companies in Chile and Argentina. And there's, I mean, I always knew that this could happen when we started doing this, but now that some of our primary funding for Grupo Eléctrico Solar Independiente is coming to an end, we may actually start looking at creating a kind of a sales back office, design back office, and working with the software provider in order to spread this throughout Latin America. So talk more about that toward the end of the year and into next year. But these are all people who have been trained in Ecuadorians.
Okay, and now we're seeing platforms also in Spanish version.
See, yeah.
So design, Enact is doing their software also in Spanish. So
Actually, they're going to be coming here. I think it's now set for the 30th of October. And when I mean here, I don't just mean San Juan. I mean actually here in People Beach Club, doing a training, and there's going to be a networking event. Obviously, none of the materials we put together until probably the 1st or 2nd of October. But so a month from now, they're going to.
Hema, I want to turn that same question to you. Where is Puerto Rico's leadership opportunity? What does Puerto Rico's leadership in energy look like? That's the theme of the conference today, Puerto Rico leadership in the energy transition. We heard from Gabby, a lot of regulations, tech may start in California. Puerto Rico may have an intermediary leadership role with regards to it accessing, making sure it flows into the rest of Latam and the Caribbean. What do you get right? What do you get wrong? Where do you see Puerto Rico's energy leadership?
It's a question of the hour, the year, the month,
How long is a piece of
especially in
string?
this context. I am hopeful because I think we have the resources, we have the human capital, and we have, I want to say mostly we have the will. And when I say we, I mean the industry, the communities. It's been very inspiring to see it all like from the grassroots movements of communities like La Margarita, shout out to Los Rios, C.P. Smith, La Cooperativa Hidroeléctrica La Montaña, and Ana Maria, and the group. Seeing those folks get organized and deliver on promises that are key to the survival of their communities has been so inspiring. And so I think we have a lot of those Wandas and Ana Marias and a lot of those leaders in Puerto Rico that are willing to go and execute. So I feel like we have the resources, we have the will on the majority of the people. I just think we have to, I say this all the time, we need radical collaboration between people that think very different. And I very much liked an article written by El Centro para una Nueva Economía. I'm not sure if you've seen it. They write great articles and I love them. It's kind of a Bible for me.
Yeah.
And they had a kind of a summary after the Puerto Rico 100 study was published. And I think a challenge, on the other hand, for us in terms of leadership is how do we address the issue of having too many cooks in the kitchen? We have too many cooks in the kitchen, and I know we say this a lot everywhere. In every forum, I feel like there's a sense of this sort of critic to ourselves. I think having a clear leader of who is designing the vision for Puerto Rico, more than just an integrated resource plan, but how are we using federal funds? How do we best optimize all the different resources that we have in order to execute on a plan that is orchestrated? To me, that's the key for Puerto Rico. And I know it's not an easy task, but I'm hopeful. Again, I think we have the resources. We just have to get organized. And I would say that I see the PREB for now because we don't have like a Department of Energy, or I hear it's sort of an Energia. I'm not going to get into that topic, but like whomever is calling the shots for energy decisions in Puerto Rico must be clear. I mean, I feel like we should ask anybody in the energy space who is calling the shots for the big decisions for Puerto Rico. For example, should we go more on the distributed energy side versus centralized generation? And I know that has a lot of repercussions, but we must know that PREPA, how does PREPA that come into that decision? If we go one route, what are we sacrificing? The trilemma. And so I think whomever is calling the shots, everybody should know who that is, and they should have the resources to do so. And at the end of the day, we have to work together in tandem because otherwise the federal funds are going to be gone. We are not going to be able to do the progress that we want to see in Puerto Rico. We're going to look back and we're going to be sad to see that we missed such a huge opportunity. So I'm hopeful. I think we have to continue to collaborate more and share, seek that common ground that we all share. And at the end of the day, be able to execute on a common plan. Because otherwise, again, time is ticking but I'm hopeful. I want to say that I'm hopeful.
So I have to say, it scares me to death to think there might be more than one CP out there. I think that we really have hit our maximum with regards to one.
That's
CP
not nice.
is enough. But otherwise, let me push back on one thing you said, which is we need to balance having a coordinated, coherent strategy with enabling competitive development of multiple strategies. Because if we have a SAR, so to speak, and we don't have to use that language, saying this is what and whether it's the Energy Bureau or whoever's calling the shot, basically say this is the plan for energy in Puerto Rico, they might be wrong. And so that and this is the beauty of competition in so many other realms is having a lot of different strategies be developed in tandem to say, this is the overall philosophy of what we want to do. Right. And I think that's part of the challenge that we've seen so far. Jump in here, guys. But one of the challenges I've seen so far is everybody knows what we want and we're all going after it. And that ends up speaking in some ways in platitudes without defining, okay, are we prioritizing cost or reliability? Are we prioritizing energy cleanliness or people in the mountains who may not have power? And actually, how do we coordinate the different priorities in there? because then that could lead to a lot of different strategies. I was talking with Francisco about this, and we had a brief back and forth about this on our last call. If we wanted to provide energy for public housing projects tomorrow, because it's so critical, we know how to do that. We can get 1,000 diesel generators and do it. That's not exactly the priority, and that's fine. But articulating what exactly do we mean by the philosophical approach? How do we balance these trade-offs and move that forward? Is in many ways what I see is somewhat missing from the leadership landscape in Puerto Rico, where there's everybody has a slightly different role and can point their fingers at somebody else justifiably, but also because it's easier than taking some of these hard stances. None of this is straightforward, but I'm not, it's easy to sit on the couch and say, okay, just articulate what it is that you want and then go get it done. I recognize the naivete in saying that, but there does seem to be not only too many cooks in the kitchen, but each cook pointing at the other cook and saying, you're the cook. It's like, but you're also a cook. And so you can't all point at the guy who's making soup and expect him to also make the whole thing.
I think, the bureaucracy is killing us.
Yep.
You know, there's so much process, and there's a lot of laws already, and we have a lot of regulation. Also, we're losing the execution. We're not executing. I don't think there's a sense of urgency. Probably, you know, yeah, let's move forward, let's do this micro, but then at the end, someone needs to sign the permit, or it's taking long. And there's a lot of things that need to happen to do a project, and you can have the best intentions and you can have the best will. But if that's why, you know, we have philosophy that everybody has to roll to the same direction. And I'm thinking like, you know, there's special interest and someone is like putting a hold or a political or something with the environment and that's at the end, we're affecting the people of Puerto Rico. Also, let's be truthful here, you know, the reconstruction, we knew it's gonna take 15 years minimum. And then we have a government that is bankrupt, that we have been 8 years with a physical board. And we don't have any control. We cannot get financing to execute projects. That's the other thing. A lot of these funds, they're reimbursement. So you need capital to execute the projects.
Yeah.
And then you add the red tape that Ignacio spoke about it, also in Larry Plus, of the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Affect us, you know, and delays everything, you know, it takes more time.
And we gotta work on all of that. And it's gotta be part of the direction. And, but I'll just say, like, coming back to the more hopeful side, I mean, the market is working. You know, we've had, it's now over 900 megawatts of distributed systems. Like, Ignacio will probably have the exact number. But the idea though that you know this can happen, it's because it can happen, right? And you're talking about where most of the barriers have come down, people have been able to, and so the market has been pushing in that direction. This is one of the areas we've been able to exploit. Industrial microgrids you brought up before. You know, we can see all the way through to the end game. Yes, we're being held up a bit, sometimes overly a bit in terms of the final permitting and others, but even with that, many have gone in. And so people are executing on what they can. There's so much more that people are actually doing to develop. You know, we talked many times about Micro de la Montaña, and we talked about Wanda and the Avena Co-op and Margarita. Like, they've put an effort into developing programs and projects, and in anticipation of capital, of regulation, of other things kind of, you know, sorting themselves out. Now, unfortunately, that's become the law, right? We need to get that sorted out, you know, with the regulation and the contracting, so it's clear what the risk structure is, and on that you can get the finance. So we've been approaching a lot of these things in Puerto Rico. Let's get the technical side right, and let's hope it either comes along or that the people or our government, they've got the money, and they're just going to give it to us anyway. And, we're gonna get that because it's important. It's part of the resilience, it's part of the background. And it all works together, but it can be done, we can do so much more.
There's a project, we were gonna have Omar with us today as well
Yeah.
this morning. He's gonna join us later tonight. He was senior advisor, with regards to energy. He's now, the head of priority projects at Puerto. You and he have worked on a project with regards to agrivoltaics. I want to dig into it a little bit. Puerto Rico, and I forgot which one of you mentioned the word laboratory, but I think it's a word that's worth building on a little bit here. We may not be the ones that are developing the regulations. We might not be the ones that are developing the tech, but we can develop use case or technologies in a regulatory environment in the tropics with everything that comes with, that already has a huge amount of expertise for distributed systems. Agrivoltaics in some ways seems rather straightforward. You guys have realized it's not, or not realized, but it is becoming more complex, I think, the more we think about it. What's the future of agrivoltaics in Puerto Rico?
It really depends on us and how we see it in supporting both farmers and the agricultural sector, as well as utility scale solar, or not utility, community solar, or even, smaller scale solar developments in Puerto Rico. But I like to think that it is a niche yet to be discovered. And I say discovered because, yes, I know that there's a lot of agrivoltaic projects in the US. I've mentioned this a couple of times in different spaces, but there's around 10 gigawatts with a G, 10 gigawatts of some sort of co-located, dual purpose, dual use projects in the US. Some of them, the low hanging fruit of some people call it being pollinator friendly vegetation with solar. And then on the more complex scale, you have very, sophisticated systems in Italy and France to grow vineyards and, citruses. And so you have a very broad range of different projects that can be done and implemented and that can work. But it all depends on this, there's 5 C's as the NREL and people that are studying this in the national labs call it. We need like 5 C's: crops, you need collaboration, you need to select the right, what the right climate is. So there's a lot of different variables that would make a specific project successful or not. And in that context, we need to know what that would look like for Puerto Rico. Financing, what the type of arrangement would be, the type of crop or livestock that is most suitable. And so looking at that specifically for Puerto Rico is what Omar and I were doing. We're trying to do, and we succeeded, I think, with Agroenergia Puerto Rico, although it was for a specific period of time. We're still looking for resources to continue the research project, but it's essentially looking at that. How would it work? Would it work? How does it look like for Puerto Rico? What types of projects can be done? Who it benefits and how it can be most beneficial for the context of Puerto Rico. And I think I like agrivoltaics in general because it makes us think out of the box. It takes into account 2 different things that not necessarily have been related in the past, which is agriculture and renewable energy. And it makes us understand that some of these, what we would see as conflicts, don't necessarily have to be a conflict. And don't necessarily have to be conflicting ideas. And so I think the idea of Agroenergia, we're also going to, be bringing additional collaborators to the space, but is looking at specifically at that. And again, Puerto Rico is land constrained. We have so many natural resources. So we understand that this topic is critical, and it's always a trade-off. It's, emissions versus land versus, it's a lot of different things that you have to consider. And so we think agrivoltaics might be a sweet spot that we can all come together at the table, address very real and necessary, topics and concerns that people might have. And so shout outs to Omar Vega and the University of Puerto Rico, the professors that made this possible. We hope that we can continue the program. And like Agroenergia, I would like to see other research-oriented collaborative initiatives in Puerto Rico, because ultimately that is what is going to drive us forward. It's research, academia, so government, private sector coming together to make something work. And so that ultimately is, it can get to commercialization.
But, I mean, I think, again, it all becomes political. But obviously the need for more, larger scale, utility scale, but also distributed, stations. So a lot of the folks, found farmland because farmland is, it's easy to access. You've got roads, you've got other things that you do. And access that to plan their solar buildings that tend to be flat, they tend to be good for solar. But there's also a food crisis in Puerto Rico, and it's very local and deservedly so. Bring back more food production on the island. And if you're taking out agricultural land, so it immediately became hyper political. The funny thing is that to me, it seemed obvious that what you really need to do is you need to pass a legislation that says, if you are going to be doing this, because we need the critical energy, maybe a little bit more right now than we need food, but let's just say that if you're taking over something that's owned farmland and you're putting it on, then it must be dual use, right? We don't care what you do, but maybe you do. But right now, we don't care what you do, but you're going to have dual use. So if you want to get that interconnected, you're going to have to show that you're a dual use facility. It's no different than, NEPA requirements to do different things and take care of the desert tortoise when you're putting something together or constructing it. It's another hurdle to overcome, but it's one you leave in the hands of the developer. They are much better equipped to actually deal with them.
I'm very pro agriculture and agricultural development in Puerto Rico. The one challenge I think with what you're saying from a policy or legislative standpoint is that you end up adding additional constraints on the supply side for these projects. We are already combating a limited amount of developers that are being told there's a certain ceiling they have to be below for the cost of electricity. All of these things add to the structure, the plan, the time, the cost of projects that we're trying to fast track. One of the things, and I think this may be the solution, as opposed to policy related, is we need creative agronomers. We need people who are willing to innovate technologically, implement smart solutions for farming operations on the island. There's a lot of poorly mechanized, highly subsidized, uncompetitive agriculture on the island broadly that needs an upgrade to the 21st century. I think where if they have the smallest of margins as it is, not having the right energy solution goes a long way. They can't operate, they don't have the right irrigation tools. If they're not efficient, then those margins are even slimmer. If we want them to be successful, making sure that energy ultimately is either boring and totally in the background or something that's implemented seamlessly into their operation, but we have to have creative agronomers. That is getting slightly away from the energy focus of the conversation, but I think it's part of the forum element, which is we need to bring those people into the fold. I don't think there's any shortage of creative energy. That I'm convinced of. We have a lot of creative energy people. We need to make sure that it is sewn into these other elements. If we're looking at agrivoltaics, how do we make sure that ag people, and I know coming from a family of farmers who are well aware of how innovation gets integrated into farming, particularly here in Puerto Rico, that needs to be replicated as much as it does on the energy side. And I think the invitation to say, look, we can be a laboratory, both on the small scale. We've got somebody from AES joining us later today on one of our panels. And AES has, I don't know how many heads of sheep at their farm in Guayama, and is so far very successful agrivoltaic setup operation. Yeah.
I want to miss the opportunity to mention that, not sure what the correct verbiage is to mention this, but they're within the selection process, I believe for tranche 2 and tranche 3, there was additional points or extra credit that was awarded to any developer who would have, again, it was mid-process of the RFP process. So I don't think it would have been fair to say, this is a requirement all of a sudden, but there were some points that were awarded to any developer that could prove that would have dual use with agricultural practice. And I think it goes in the right direction. I would also say that there's a lot of creative farmers in Puerto Rico too. It's a matter of, again, fostering that collaborative space. It's bizarre to me. I get to share with my parents and I know a lot of agriculture because they are in this space. And of course, I'm in the energy space. So to me, it's like, well, you know, just have to get together and talk about this and then match potential interest in farmers with these developers. To me, it's obvious, but again, I don't think there's enough of these spaces where both sectors can, you know, share ideas and, you know, become partners. Ultimately, that's what I want to say at least half of tranche one developers are wanting to do. I've heard anything from having, you know, sheep raising operations, all the way to having specific areas devoted to research and to small farmer land trusts for them to be able to use the space and arrange different types of crops and agricultural practices in order for them to have a space, given that most of the farmland in Puerto Rico and the trusts that exist are more oriented to larger farming operations. So then you have a niche of these like smaller farmers that want to do that, but then they can't necessarily access the land. So I think a lot of these developers are wanting to address that space. We just have to make sure that we foster that collaboration.
And there's some technology that specifically brought to Gallup, right, to look at things like this. So, you know, larger scale, you know, single tracking things that have hydraulics that are simplified, but can stand up, you know, something like 8 feet till follow the sun, and then in a storm situation, actually fall flat and come down closer to the earth, so it doesn't create such a sailboat, because that's your trade-off. Right, you know, you've got these things, if you put them too far above the crops to give room, that creates additional conflicts in a storm and maybe makes them uninsurable.
So we are about 5 minutes away from the end of our conversation. We're about an hour and 5 minutes away from the start of National Clean Energy Week event here at Vivo Beach Club. Final thoughts, Gabby, what do people absolutely need to know about the energy community?
And there's a lot of opportunity. And with everyone, I'm happy that Hema came back, but we need all those engineers that from Puerto Rico that are working in the States to come here. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of different types of projects, not just installing, you know, Genera's doing some battery, we're gonna do some projects. Luma is changing meters. You know, there's some infrastructure projects going on, you know, agriculture, there's $75 million for agriculture, and there was even an article yesterday of how they're being affected because of the outages. So there's money for the hospitals, there's money for low income.
Yeah.
There's same, you know, but yeah, we just need people to come here, we need more technology, more testing on different technologies, so I see Puerto Rico on a great opportunity, you know, to be here, and it's very thankful to be part of it.
Hey, my final question for you. What are you most excited about with regards to energy in Puerto Rico?
I will probably go back to what I mentioned at the beginning, which is that intersection between technology and policy. Personally, I'm very passionate about that intersection and being able to drive such change that would impact generations in Puerto Rico to come, just by collaborating on specific things, be it of regulation for interconnection of DERs, or how should we frame community solar in Puerto Rico, or, you know, how the technologies should be adapted in terms of DERMS and vertical integration with the utility. There's a lot of things that anybody can come and support with that, again, would change lives of Puerto Ricans for generations to come, and that's what, you know, makes me excited specifically. I see a lot of opportunities to contribute and pitch in at different degrees, and so that's what I'm excited about.
I can't encourage our audience enough to come to Green Drinks, not only tonight, but in the future.
Yeah.
Talk to Hema, talk to Gabby. If you're new and it's your first time joining Green Drinks, get ready to introduce yourself. Gabby will force a microphone into your hand, but that shouldn't intimidate you. You're amongst friends. I think we'll leave it there. Tom, any final words from you?
No, I just, I guess I'm excited as Sam is for today and for the forum. You know, get involved, join us. You can do it online. But we really want the participation, and there's a lot that we can accomplish. But we got to start with informing, educating, and then achieving.
Absolutely, and look forward to having you guys back on for a future summit. This has been awesome.
Enjoy the space, and I think you're doing a great job. I want to say that I loved the episode on PR60, right? We have 2 segments here, the Caribbean and the Forum, there's Caribbean 60 minutes. Last last episodes with Angel, I learned a lot. I was actually taking notes from that episode.
Good,
I'm a
glad to hear
nerd,
that.
but I I think you're doing a great job, so I want to make sure that I thank you both for the effort.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll see you guys soon. Come by Vigo Beach Club this afternoon.